And I'm Richard Eskow, RJ Eskow. We are back on the Zero Hour, and our guest right now is Marianne Williamson. Marianne is a candidate for Congress in my home district, the Los Angeles district, formerly or currently occupied by Representative Henry Waxman. Now, Marianne is an internationally acclaimed spiritual author and lecturer. 6 of her 10 published books have been New York Times bestsellers, which is a record that many people would envy. She started Project Angel Food. She's been very involved in other charitable and peace activities, and now she is running for Congress as an independent, which seems to make a lot of people uncomfortable. And I'm curious to know why that is, although that, of course, that part's not Marianne's responsibility. But Marianne, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Richard.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And, here's one of the things that strikes me before we get into the substance and the issues and why you're running. So many people seem to have made comments about, the New York Times headline said, new age guru or something like that seeks spiritual position. Tom DeLay was an exterminator before he ran for Congress, but I'll bet there weren't headlines that said scourge of fleas and bedbugs seeks political position. So why is it you think that your candidacy is making people like the New York Times feel awkward when they write their headlines? Do you have any theories on that?
Well, first of all, thank you for mentioning it. And I also think when Martin Luther King said we have the opportunity to inject a new dimension of love into the veins of human civilization, I don't think they called him a New Ager. Gandhi talked about love, and Martin Luther King talked about love, and no one seemed to contextualize it as woo-woo. There's a term that's used in the recovery movement where it says contempt prior to investigation. I don't think anybody who has actually read my books or heard me lecture either about metaphysics or about politics, I might not be their cup of tea, but I don't think people walk away thinking, I was wearing saffron robes and, worshiping crystals. So it's difficult to deal with a caricature except by bringing it to light, and I appreciate you're doing it. The conversation around a more enlightened worldview, a more integrative and holistic approach to life is now baked into the cake, Richard. This is not a fringe conversation. I think it makes you look fringe today if you're not involved in that conversation. I mean, it's already transformed our mainstream impulses towards business, towards health and healing, towards spirituality. So the fact that it's in a way new to politics, that someone is having the radicalism to point out that we are more than economic creatures, I'm hoping that the people of District 33 see through the ruse.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, too, because, of course, at this moment in history, that role for political activism seems new and unfamiliar. But Tom Paine, when he began writing his pamphlets, which I would say was the proto form of blogging, and inspired the American Revolution, was really talking about fundamentally redefining the human relationship to society, to the economy, to the world at large. And this show is based on the belief that if we don't redefine our relationship to the planet, to the future, to each other, it's now become impractical to go on without engaging in that struggle. So we're delighted to have you on and talk about it. But I also don't want to give listeners an inaccurate sense of your campaign, your website, which I believe is marianneforcongress.org, if I remember correctly.
.com, marianneforcongress.com.
Okay, I'm glad. Thank you for that. But you give your detailed positions on a number of issues, including a number of critical issues.
Right.
One of them jumped out at me, and we can get to why in a minute, because not too many candidates for Congress nowadays are strongly staking a position on the immorality and impracticality of drone use.
Yes.
And yet your website is very strong on the issue of drones. So two-part question. One is, what is your position on drones? And two, why do you think there are so few voices in Congress today about drone usage?
Well, the three issues we need to be concerned about, all Americans, is shrinking civil liberties, expanding corporate influence, and domestic surveillance. Now, I don't think the average American seems to realize the technical capability of these drones. They can know who you're sleeping with and what you just logged onto on your computer and what room you just walked into. Now, our government, the same government that was forced to acknowledge the NSA spying because it had to, this government tells us not to worry about this because these drones will only be used by Amazon.com and FedEx and by law enforcement out to get the bad guys. And then if you ask the government, well, what about privacy concerns, we're told that we don't have to worry about that because the drones have to adhere to all local, federal, and state privacy laws. Well, if that doesn't make you guffaw, I don't know what does. But this is all part of a larger picture by which we're losing our democracy, Richard. It's interesting what you were talking about Tom Paine, because it was not just Tom Paine, actually, it was the entire matrix of the founders who were laying claim not only to an extraordinary political vision, but to a philosophical vision. It was a moment in the philosophical evolution of the world, as well as the political evolution of the world, that we repudiated an aristocratic system. We repudiated a system in which power and material resources were to be basically siphoned off into the hands of a very few who took what they wanted and then just let whatever crumbs fell off the table after they had feasted be, struggled over and competed for by everyone else. Now, we can call it a corporatocracy or plutocracy or oligarchy. I don't care what we call it. But I think we need to awaken to the realization that we have reverted to an aristocratic system. We repudiated an aristocratic system 200 years ago, and it is time to repudiate it again.
Well, I think that's extremely well said. I would also close off the drone discussion by pointing out that one of the most powerful drone systems is called Gorgon Stare, as you know, which is as frightening a name as one can imagine.
Thank you.
Okay, there are going to be people out there saying, I like what Marianne has to say. I love what Marianne has to say. I agree with her, but can she win? What do you say to that?
I can win if everyone who agrees with me votes for me. I mean, we must disenthrall ourselves. The American people are just towing the line with this corporatist direction. And as far as progressives are concerned, progressives have got to break this codependent chokehold that with the Democratic Party. We continue, progressives are looked to by the Democratic, and I'm a lifelong Democrat, but I can't toe this line with the corporatist direction of either major party anymore. Progressives, the Democratic Party comes to progressives every time there's an election and then ignores them until the next one. When are we going to get this? What is going to motivate the Democratic Party to get its soul back if not enough people who say, you lost me, guys? We need some Paul Wellstone. If you stand for the Democratic part of the Democratic Party, that's why, to me, I look to someone like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is an independent, but he votes more like a Democrat than many Democrats do. And I've said to many people who say what you just said, could you get elected? It is harder for me to get elected, Richard, but I can do more if I win, if I can do more as an independent. Abolition did not come from a major party. Women's suffrage did not come from a major party. Civil rights did not come from a major party. These are people's movements that get enacted by parties secondarily. And we need that now. This chokehold that the two parties have on the system is unhealthy for our democracy. It's sucking all the oxygen out of our public discourse. And we must disenthrall ourselves of the idea that we have to filter all of our political ideas through either party. That's why neither party, including the Democrats, are bringing up drones, are bringing up our mass incarceration rate, which is higher than any country in the world, with an African-American man having a 1 in 3 lifetime probability of incarceration. Not a major political party, continuing the Democrats, is really talking about the fact that we have 1 in 5 American children living in poverty and food insecure. Not hungry, they use food insecure now because a lot of these obese children are actually malnourished. So sometimes, parties were meant to serve us. We're not meant to serve parties. The parties are not even mentioned in our founding documents, and George Washington, in essence, warned us against them in his farewell address. So if enough people...
I would also add that because, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but because you're running in California, where the rules are a little different, you don't need to be the nominee of a specific party in order to win. Is that correct? Explain how that works a little bit.
Yeah, well, with our open primary, the top 2 vote getters in the June 3rd primary then go to the general election in November. That's an important issue, and thank you for bringing it up, because there's no way I can, quote-unquote, split a vote. People are saying, I don't want to throw away my vote and help elect a Republican. It doesn't work that way. The calculus is such that that cannot happen with the open primary. Only 2 people go to the election in November.
Well, and you were able, along the way, to pick up the endorsement this week of Keith Ellison, Representative Keith Ellison, who is, as co-leader of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, fairly prominent as a Democrat within Congress. Did he tell you he gave a good statement on your behalf? I assume you were pleasantly surprised by that endorsement?
I would say I was very pleased. I wouldn't say surprised. You know, Jennifer Granholm, former governor of Michigan, has also endorsed me. Dennis Kucinich, who is certainly a Democratic representative, endorsed me. Van Jones, who is endorsing me, he's certainly associated with the Democratic Party. You know, I'm not making war here on the Democrats. I mean, I'm simply saying, as someone who's been a lifelong Democrat, I feel like Paul Wellstone, you know, Democratic wing of the Democratic Party. And the freeze-out that you are referring to here is part of the problem. You know, you can see right here what's happening here. How will there ever be fundamental change if we are looking to an institution that is so fundamentally tied to the status quo in order to effectuate that change? They are.
Well, on that, we're going to have to leave it, Marianne. But Marianne Williamson, candidate for Congress in the 33rd California District, MarianneForCongress.com. Thanks so much for being with us on the Zero Hour.
Thank you so much for having me. All my best. Bye.
Bye. We'll be right back after this.